Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Money Mike, and today, and actually all week, here on the Everything Else podcast, it is WWE week. Now, if you are a wrestling fan that is tuned in for the first time to this channel, normally all I discuss all the latest news in the NFL with the Front 7 podcast. So, if you are new to this channel, you come here during WWE week, make sure, go back, check out the Front 7 podcast. You like what you see, hit the subscribe button, and ring the bell so you can be notified when I post new videos. And this week is going to be a week full of videos. Everybody knows it is Wrestlemania this Sunday, and well, first we gotta get through Monday Night Raw and SmackDown Live, in which it all begins tonight with Monday Night Raw, the go-home show before WrestleMania 33 in Orlando, Florida at Camping World Stadium, which was where WrestleMania 24 was held, in which featured Ric Flair's final WWE match in history as he lost to Shawn Michaels, ending his career nearly 9 years later. Where exactly 9 years later, the WWE returns back to Camping World Stadium, and boy, to me there seems to be a lack of excitement around this year's WrestleMania. Now I kind of feel the same way about last year, because last year's Mania I really wasn't too excited for, because the card to me just didn't feel like WrestleMania 33 this year. It doesn't have that WrestleMania type of feel. Now, granted, with the brand split, SmackDown Live has done a great job generating their feuds and getting everybody excited for WrestleMania and seeing the SmackDown Live matches. But the one thing that Monday Night Raw has done, and this next part of this video, or the whole rest of the video, is essentially probably going to kill any chance of me getting hired by the WWE in the future. But last week, we had Stephanie McMahon fire Mick Foley from the Raw General Manager position. Now, since the brand split, we have grown accustomed to Monday Night Raw pretty much being a rerun of the same matches over and over and over. Now, SmackDown Live, better writing team, better show, yada yada yada. But SmackDown Live also fell victim to the same booking over and over. How many times did we have to see AJ Styles and Dean Ambrose? When the brand split started, we saw Baron Corbin and Dolph Ziggler face off 100 times. So both shows kind of fell into that repeat booking style. But Monday Night Raw just did it so much more worse. And now, after last week, where Stephanie fired Mick Foley, now all of a sudden, now we're not just repeating matches. Now we've gone back in time to 2013-14 when it was the Authority. And it's almost like it's Stephanie and Triple H running the show again. And I feel like heading into this year's Mania, I feel like Daniel Bryan should be beating the Authority at WrestleMania, overcoming the odds. But then I kind of remembered, that was at WrestleMania 30. And truly, when you think about this here, you go back to that time period, 2013, 2014, leading up to WrestleMania 30, and you kind of look at it now, what has changed? We are seeing the same Stephanie McMahon that we saw with the Authority that Daniel Bryan was fighting against. And she's been stuck in that character since the creation of the Authority back in 2013, it's frustrating when you're watching Raw and you see how Stephanie just overpowers all the superstars. The males, the females. I mean, they fired Mick Foley, but in true form, and folks, I cannot stress enough, I'm hoping maybe if I do apply for a job one day, that maybe they won't ever hear this, but Stephanie McMahon, they kept the cancer that is Stephanie McMahon. She has been a cancer to Monday Night Raw since the brand split started. I mean, the constant abuse of Mick Foley, week in, week out, until she finally fired him. You know, her character finally, got to bury Mick Foley and got to fire him, It's like now she's the one in charge, the only one in charge, and, it's now her show, which again is sad because now the cancer on Raw is going to keep growing instead of shrinking and disappearing. Like the whole concept of Mick Foley saying that he's going to fire somebody and then he fires, or he wants to fire Stephanie McMahon. It was actually a brilliant concept, except nothing came of it. It's not like you had something where Sami Zayn, who comes out, defends it, or he defends Mick Foley, and then Samoa Joe, who's on the side of Triple H, comes out, defends Stephanie, and then from that point, Sami Zayn would face Samoa Joe in WrestleMania, where if Sami Zayn won, Stephanie McMahon would be fired. If Samoa Joe won, then Mick Foley would be fired. Because as of right now, when you look at it, Zayn and Joe do not have a match. I assume they're going to be in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, unless they're going to have a spot where Samoa Joe gets involved in the non-sanctioned match of Triple H and Seth Rollins on behalf of Triple H, and he helps him defeat Seth Rollins. But regardless, as of now, Samoa Joe and Sami Zayn do not have a WrestleMania match. So they could have really done more with this. I mean, Mick Foley was going to be given time off to have hip surgery. And I wish Mick Foley the best of luck in that. And hopefully the surgery goes well. At the very, very least, the only thing that segment did was just make, Stephanie McMahon's ego and her power trip even more annoying than she already was. Now, let's look at SmackDown Live. Now, there were times when you watch SmackDown Live, and can't count them, but, I can't really remember. But I do know that there were times where we did not see Shane McMahon or Daniel Bryan. Throughout the whole 2-hour show, we did not see Shane or Daniel at least one time. No pre-tape backstage segment. No segment where they came out and made a match in front of the live audience. Just no appearance. It was kind of like wow. The night before when you have Stephanie and Mick Foley, they're kind of being shoved down our throats here. Where it's like, yeah, they're the authority. They're the people in charge. And, they're like every other segment, it seemed. Whereas you then tune in to SmackDown and it's like, wait, was Shane and Daniel on the show? Did I miss something? It's crazy to see how much of a difference it can make in the show when there's actually less authority figures on the show, or less of a figure on the show. Again, let's look at another WWE show, NXT. William Regal is the general manager in NXT. Now, for most people, we know that, but if you watch NXT, or if you tune in for the first time, you wouldn't know who the general manager was because sometimes you didn't even see William Regal. Not even in pre-taped segments that he normally does in the back, where normally he does a segment at the end of the show, the beginning of the show that's pre-taped, where tonight on NXT this is what we're going to see, or next week this is because of what happened tonight, next week this is going to happen. And Regal, he barely makes any live appearances in front of the crowd. I mean, if you go back, you watched a couple weeks ago when he came out on stage and he made the announcement of the it's a tag team elimination, 3-way tag team elimination match between DIY, the Authors of Pain, and the Revival for the NXT Tag Team Championships. But that's it. We don't really see Regal in every other segment. We don't see Regal out there in front of the live crowd starting the show with a 15-minute promo with a heel, because, in retrospect on Raw, it was always starting off with Stephanie or Mick Foley, and depending on it, if Stephanie was there, then it would be the babyface confronting her. If it was Mick Foley, a heel would confront him, or then the babyface would make a save, which would then set up a match for later on tonight, or later on that night. But with NXT, you don't see that with Regal. You see him during contract signings, but like I said, you really don't see him that much. You wouldn't even know NXT has a general manager unless you've watched NXT for the last couple of years. Now, how exactly would you remove a cancer from Monday Night Raw? The on-air product, it suffers when Stephanie McMahon is just burying talent over and over and every week. Never did Mick Foley ever get a chance to really fire back on her. She always was all up in his face, yelling, shouting at him, and he can never really get his comeuppance, as they would say in pro wrestling. Stephanie could always villainize and always abuse her power, always do all these things, and then never could the talent really get their revenge because they can't touch her. She's untouchable. So the entire thing is just her inflating her ego and putting down a superstar when you're supposed to be building superstars. And if you're building a babyface against a evil authority figure, and the authority figure doesn't like said babyface, well, you have to get to the point where the babyface overcomes it, right? Well, with Stephanie, none of that happens. It's just her constantly burying said babyface week in, week out. Or if they're in Chicago, taking a stab at CM Punk. Now, granted, I really hope this does not lead to Triple H coming back as an authority figure. If you noticed, let's go back to the summer here. When Triple H lost the title at WrestleMania to Roman Reigns last year, from that point on, we did not see Triple H. To this very day, Triple H has yet to have his one-on-one rematch for the WWE Championship. Because Roman Reigns came out, they immediately went into a new program, new feud, where it was a fatal 4-way, AJ Styles won, and they went right into AJ versus Roman Reigns for the title feud for the next couple months. So Triple H kind of disappeared from TV after Mania last year. And then Finn Balor got hurt, and then all of a sudden, okay, now we got to crown a second Universal Champion within 24 hours after crowning a first one. So with Finn Balor injured, they do a fatal 4-way, and out comes Triple H from the crowd, or from wherever he came from, and the fans popped. It was like, yeah, Triple H is back. And it was, Pedigree Roman threw Seth in. It's like 1, 2, 3, eliminated Roman. And Roman Reigns, he gets the boo. He gets cheered when he gets pinned. And I'll discuss that more later on this week when I go a little bit in depth on Roman Reigns and the constant over pushing of Roman Reigns, which is another cancer to Monday Night Raw, which I will talk about later this week. But I want to talk about the main cancer on Raw, which is Stephanie McMahon and her on-air character that never seems to ever be put down by somebody. And when you look at Vince McMahon, when Vince McMahon kind of stepped back in 2011, they did that whole segment where Triple H was now going to be in charge. The board of directors had fired Vince. When Vince McMahon started making less appearances, and he wasn't a full-time authority figure anymore, and his appearances became rare. And if Vince McMahon showed up, you knew something was going to happen, because you don't see Vince that often anymore. So, again, let's go back to over a year ago, when Roman Reigns beat the crap out of Triple H at TLC, and the next night on Raw, Stephanie McMahon's berating Roman, and she's like, yeah, well, it could be easy to fire you, but, there's somebody on the way here that's going to fire you personally, and that's the chairman of the board, Vince McMahon. And the crowd popped because they knew, oh my, Vince McMahon's going to be here. Holy crap. Like, okay, now we have to watch. If Vince McMahon would show up on Raw tomorrow night, he would get a huge reaction from the crowd, because we don't see him. In wrestling, when a guy goes away for a while, whether it's an injury or they sign elsewhere, the WWE doesn't renew their contract, and they come back years later, the fans kind of realize, yeah, well, we've missed you. And just think about it. I mean, when Kurt Angle comes out at the Hall of Fame ceremony, think about how big of a reaction that's going to be for Kurt Angle. Not just at the Hall of Fame ceremony, but the night at WrestleMania, because it's not the night after anymore, because the Hall of Fame is now, I think it's Saturday with NXT on Friday. I believe that's the case. But when Kurt Angle comes out at WrestleMania, when they introduce the Hall of Fame class, the pop that he is going to receive to being in a WWE arena, being in front of a live crowd of thousands, over 60,000 plus. The reaction he will get when his music hits, to hear that music for the first time in about almost 10 years, because he left in 2006. So in about 11 years, when that music hits, we are going to be taken back into a time warp, where it's like, man, it feels so good to hear that music, and it feels so good to see Kurt Angle. And with Vince, and you see how they run things on SmackDown Live, well, with Vince, it's like, well, when he shows up, something's going down. You have to watch the rest of the show to see what happens. Now, when Shane and Daniel Bryan show up, it's not the same feel, but it's kind of like oh, okay, what's going to happen? Because Shane and Daniel, they don't make really much appearances. They do appear in segments backstage, and which I assume are pre-tape segments backstage. But rarely ever do they come out to the live crowd. And I know a lot of people are just so worried about this AJ Styles versus Shane McMahon feud. But honestly, I think, to me, this one's okay. Because it's kind of like, it's been building up over the course of a couple months, whatever. But it's not like one of those things where it would be on Raw, where it would just be dragged out every week. Just dragged out until WrestleMania. They really didn't do anything with the build of a authority figure versus said superstar. With this one, it didn't really set it in tone until the incident 2 weeks ago when Shane McMahon was assaulted by AJ Styles in the parking lot, and he threw him through the car window and basically set up the feud, the match, done. Now we're at Shane versus AJ. But again, after what happened with Shane being thrown through the window, we saw Daniel Bryan, and he fired him. Now technically Shane brought him back so he can fight him, but Daniel Bryan showed up, he fired him, he did his job. So, to me, there's so much that Monday Night Raw can take. I mean, consider this. How is it that Triple H, when you look at how NXT is booked, how the shows are run, how less of William Regal we see, how is it that Triple H doesn't have the power to say, okay, you know what, this is what we're going to do, we're going to make the authority figures more like William Regal, we'll have it in pre-tape segments, not out there with the live crowd as much, we'll dedicate the show to wrestling, whatever, boom, done, right? I mean, I don't know how they're not booking Monday Night Raw like that. I mean, it's okay if you want to have authority figures, okay, fine, whatever, but not at the expense of the superstars being buried every week, and you're just destroying any type of character build of getting the fans to get behind the people that Stephanie is berating, because she does it every week. So it's kind of like, well, she does it every week, but superstars don't do nothing, don't retaliate, so how are we supposed to get behind said character and we're supposed to actually be cheering? So to me, I really hope after WrestleMania they find a way to get rid of Stephanie. I know it's not going to probably happen, I know. It's wishful thinking, right? But Stephanie McMahon is a cancer to Monday Night Raw, and it hurts the on-screen product. She needs to take a lesson from Triple H and just not show up on TV every week. If, let her go on vacation for a couple months, then let her come back. Maybe let Kurt Angle run things. The rumor mill is like, oh, who's going to be the new general manager? Could it be Kurt Angle? Could it be this person? If it's Kurt Angle, maybe just let him kind of be in charge. Take Stephanie off TV, and then let Kurt Angle just run things. Give it a fresh breath of air that Raw desperately needs. And we all need a break from Stephanie McMahon in the same old authority figure that she's been since 2013. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think about Stephanie McMahon on Raw? Is she a cancer to the on-screen product? Or is it just simply, again, as we know, is it just maybe the writing that's not helping her? Maybe it's just her being overbooked by the writers, even though she has a saying creative, but still. Maybe that's another reason. Her ego does not allow it to, where she can't take a break. Where she has to be in every other segment. Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think? Is Stephanie McMahon outplayed? Has her character run its course and the WWE just does not realize it, and thus they keep thinking that we need an evil authority figure when SmackDown Live and NXT, that you do not need a top heel authority figure to have a good show. I'll be back with more later this week as WWE Week on this channel, on the Everything Else podcast kicks off, and I will have another video later on today posting the top cities that WWE needs to go to for WrestleMania in the future. We know New Orleans is once again hosting WrestleMania 34 next year, but I will give on the money list mine top 10 cities that the WWE should go to for future WrestleManias. I've been your host, Money Mike. This has been the Everything Else podcast. It is WWE week, but most importantly, it is WrestleMania week.